Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. Herrick's, Long Island. A quiet Friday in mid-October 2025. Midday traffic is thin, the school run is over, and a single-family home on Larch Drive sits still. From the curb, nothing looks wrong. No shattered glass, no alarm, no neighbors on the lawn. Inside, it's different. A patrol unit conducts a welfare check. The door opens under authority. The air is sharp. In the living area, officers locate a woman on the floor, unresponsive. The scene is intact, no smash-in, no ransack, just a house that reads like someone understood the routine and the gaps in it. The call for help started the way many do in suburbs like this. A teenager couldn't reach her mom. Pickup time had passed. After trying, she requested a safety check. When officers crossed the threshold, they moved with protocol, scene secured, body assessed, time noted, identification confirmed. The victim is Alina Asif, 46, mother of 3, ages 17 to 18, mid-teens, and 7, known in the neighborhood for predictable school runs and a steady schedule. A supervisor notifies the medical examiner and detectives. The room is photographed before anything moves. First observations matter. There is no obvious forced entry and no sign of a struggle beyond the collapse point. A closer look documents chemical injury on the face, noted as superficial burns and irritation consistent with close exposure. EMS confirms no pulse. Detectives order protective gear for anyone crossing the inner perimeter. Trace preservation takes priority. Swabs are taken from surfaces near the body, door hardware, and a short path to a powder room sink. HVAC registers are taped. The sink trap will be removed later under lab chain of custody. The medical examiner's preliminary assessment records suspicious death with features of chemical asphyxiation. That language is precise on purpose. Agents that interfere with cellular respiration can act fast and leave limited external signs. The visible burns suggest close contact delivery rather than a distant ingestion. Toxicology will speak later. Today's job is to fix the timeline and guard every molecule that might carry a signature. Detectives expand outward. They check exterior cameras and doorbells on the block. A nearby lens will matter, but that's a later chapter. For now, scene control is the product, entry logs, gloves changed, swabs labeled, photographs indexed. They note a detail that will drive the entire case. Nothing about the room looks random. Someone used the quiet between drop-off and pickup. Someone counted minutes. The data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. Only the immediate facts are released to the public. An adult female found deceased inside a residence. Investigation active, family notified. Back at the precinct, a whiteboard gets 3 columns: scene, time, access. The first column begins with what the house already told them. This was a controlled entry, a targeted window, a delivery method that points toward planning rather than impulse. In towns like this, murders aren't just crimes, they tear at the fabric of a quiet community. The work now is to stitch the fabric back together with evidence, not guesses. The day makes sense when you know the routine. Fridays in Herrick's are predictable. The youngest child is dropped at school after 8, the house is quiet by mid-morning, and there is a 2 to 3 hour gap before any pickups or deliveries break the silence. Detectives start there, because a routine tells you who had notice, who had time, and who could act without drawing attention. They confirm school attendance, pull bell schedules, and cross-check text activity around the morning run. Nothing theatrical, just a clean map of where minutes move. Alina Asif's pattern is straightforward. She handled the school drive for the 7-year-old. She returned home. She usually answered messages within a narrow window before lunch. On October 17, 2025, that pattern stops. Calls go unanswered, a pickup is missed, and a welfare check is requested. The house is intact and the body is found inside. There is no dispute about location or sequence. This is the only scene, and the timeline starts and ends here. Background risk is documented, not guessed. Patrol logs show multiple prior responses for domestic conflict at the residence in the months leading up to October. One report notes a threat invoking household chemicals. No active order of protection is on file. On October 9, 2025, divorce papers are served. Investigators do not read motives from emotions, they read escalation from records. Separation, service of papers, and a defined routine can create opportunity. That is a pattern known across many jurisdictions, and it frames how interviews are prioritized. The first round of questions stays tight. Who knew the Friday window? Who had a way in without leaving tool marks? Who had reason to choose a method that limits noise and shortens struggle? Detectives set up two boards, access and preparation. Access covers keys, codes, prior residence, and passive entry points. Preparation looks for protective gear, chemical knowledge, practice attempts, and research behavior. The scene's condition pushes them toward planning rather than impulse. There is no smash-in, nothing scattered, no broad surface transfer. The injury profile, chemical effect localized to the face with rapid collapse, suggests an application at close range. That indicates familiarity with the victim's movement and comfort with being inside the home long enough to apply and exit. Digital work supports the same direction. Phones from family members are collected with consent where appropriate. Detectives request neighborhood footage, traffic cameras on feeder roads, and any private security lenses pointed toward the block. They are not searching for a cinematic chase, they are looking for normal cars at abnormal times, for a person on foot before or after the school run, for a silhouette that repeats across angles. A single masked figure captured entering and waiting will matter later, but today the emphasis is on corroboration, timestamps, whether reflections on glass, and whether a hood, mask, and gloves appear consistent across cameras. Medical findings stay narrow this early. The medical examiner tags the death as homicide, consistent with chemical-induced asphyxiation, and flags the visible facial burns as significant. Unknown chemical is deliberate wording until confirmatory tests lock in composition. Detectives know how long that part takes. They do not speculate in the meantime. Their job is to keep the chain of custody clean and widen the net on who could plan this without turning the first 48 hours into noise. Family and neighbors are interviewed with care. The focus is routine, not opinion. When did you last see her at the door, in the car line, on the sidewalk? Did anyone ask about schedules, drop-off times, or spare keys? Did a service worker appear off-slot? Residents in quiet communities often remember small things, a parked vehicle that usually isn't there, a person at a corner who never waits there. Those details are logged against footage and phone pings. In towns like this, murders aren't just crimes, they tear at the fabric of a quiet community. The way to repair it is consistent, align verifiable times, remove guesswork, and let the records carry the weight. There is a human piece that doesn't interfere with the facts. 3 children have lost stability in a single morning. Detectives coordinate with victim services and school liaisons while they work the board. It's not sentiment, it's standard practice. Safety planning continues even as evidence builds. Cases involving separation demand it. By the end of day 2, the board has fewer names. Access plus preparation narrows the field. The gap between drop-off and discovery isn't wide, but it is enough for someone who understands the house, the schedule, and the risks of noise. The data aligns cleanly. Sometimes that's the problem, clean lines can hide how the plan was learned. That is where the cameras and purchase trails will speak next. The medical examiner takes custody at the scene and moves by protocol. A short external exam notes localized chemical injury across the face and mouth area. There are no defensive lacerations or blunt force patterns that suggest a fight inside the room. That matters. It directs the early hypothesis toward a fast-acting agent delivered at close range rather than a prolonged assault. The body is bagged in a way that preserves trace, separate paper bags over the hands, a clean wrap that won't smear residues, labels verified out loud and on the evidence log. The house remains sealed while technicians finish their sweep. At the morgue, the sequence is straightforward. A full autopsy documents airways, lungs, and mucosal surfaces, then reserves tissue for toxicology. Blood, vitreous humor, liver, and gastric contents are drawn into separate tubes with chain of custody stickers. Some samples are prioritized for rush testing because of the visible burns. The working language stays cautious, suspected chemical asphyxiation, agent unknown. Reporters will later repeat a phrase heard at the briefing, cyanide-like, but the file only uses it as a descriptor for effect on oxygen use, not as a confirmed compound. Confirmations take instrumentation and time. Back at the house, CSU techs follow a grid. They swab door hardware, a few inches of flooring around the collapse point, and a short trail to a half bath. A sink trap is capped and removed. HVAC return vents get tape lifts. Clothing from the victim is bagged separately for trace transfer. Items nearby, tissues, a drinking glass left from the previous evening, a hand towel, are logged and isolated. Nothing suggests a widespread spill. The pattern looks controlled, targeted, and brief. The data align too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. Toxicology starts with broad screens and then narrows. Laboratories run immunoassays and mass spectrometry panels to flag volatile compounds or metabolites that point to impaired cellular respiration. If an agent works by choking off the body's ability to use oxygen, you see it downstream: rapid unconsciousness, minimal external trauma, and tissue changes that support a hypoxic mechanism. The visible burns on the face suggest close contact, possibly a splash or a directed application. That would explain the lack of loud struggle and the intact room. It also sets up a second question: where did the chemical originate, and what did the person who delivered it wear to avoid self-injury? Investigators do not wait for the final printout to act on logic. They ask the lab to check for common corrosives that could irritate skin without causing asphyxial death. Those would not fit the collapse profile. They also request screening for compounds that can be acquired through industrial suppliers or repackaged from smaller sources. None of that means a specific product is named in the file today. It means the search warrants they draft will focus on purchases of protective masks, gloves, containers, and chemicals associated with respiratory failure. Those are ordinary questions in an extraordinary context. The timeline drives each lab decision. The youngest child is dropped at school. The house is quiet for a known window. The welfare check occurs later the same day. That leaves a narrow span for a person to enter, deliver a chemical at close range, and exit without creating a mess or a scene. Camera canvassing has already begun. The analytical plan mirrors that, if clothing fibers or microscopic droplets are found on vents or linens, they can be compared to items recovered under warrant from any person of interest. If trace appears in the sink trap, it can be matched to containers or mixing tools later seized. Nothing in this approach assumes guilt, it assumes good practice. The medical examiner's office writes what the public rarely sees: a clean, unemotional paragraph that anchors cause and manner. Homicide. Asphyxiation via an unknown chemical agent. Facial chemical injury, consistent with close exposure. No alternate scene. No second narrative. That single page protects the case from drift and protects the audience from confusion. When the story hits the evening news, neighbors hear what they need to know: a mother of 3 is dead, the investigation is active, and the house on Larch Drive is the only place that matters right now. There is still a human line here, even in a lab report. People who care about Alina Ossoff want action fast. Detectives know speed is important, but accuracy is how cases survive court. Families deserve a conclusion that doesn't collapse under cross-examination. That is why the language stays tight. That is why the lab says unknown until the machine says otherwise. In towns like this, murders aren't just crimes, they tear at the fabric of a quiet community. The repair is evidence, piece by piece. The timeline starts with what can be proved, not what anyone thinks. School confirms the 7-year-old was dropped off shortly after 8 on Friday, October 17, 2025. Attendance registered on time. That puts Alina Ossoff's vehicle back on Larch Drive within minutes. Text activity on her phone goes quiet before noon. When the welfare check is requested later that day, officers meet a locked, intact home and a victim inside. The job now is to pin the minutes between those bookends and find who used them. Detectives canvass the block with consent forms and patience. Doorbells, exterior domes, small cameras mounted under eaves, each one gets a copy request. They start with the angles that can see the sidewalk and the driveway mouth. 2 houses down, a doorbell lens catches a single figure moving along the property line at 8:37 a.m. Hood up. Mask on. Gloves. The person avoids the main path and uses the shadow of a hedge to reach the side of the house. No forced entry shows up later, so investigators mark this as a person who either had access or waited for a moment when the door could be opened from within. Across the street, another camera records the same figure from a different angle. Timestamps are off by 30 seconds, text correct for that, and build a synchronized reel. The subject pauses, looks toward the road, and disappears along the side wall that leads toward a secondary entrance. Nothing loud follows. No neighbor reports a shout or a crash. When the footage picks up the figure again, the person is leaving the same way, mask, hood, and gloves still in place, during a window that matches the period when Elena stops responding to messages. The absence of panic on camera doesn't prove anything by itself. Combined with the scene inside, it suggests planning. Traffic cameras on feeder roads add context. Investigators request a narrow slice, 15 minutes before drop-off to 90 minutes after. They are not looking for a chase, they are matching vehicles that appear near Larch Drive when they shouldn't. One sedan passes the block slowly at 8:31 a.m., loops a second time at 8:34, then doesn't appear again. The plate is not legible from the municipal camera, but a private security system at a nearby business catches a partial. That partial goes to a query, standard procedure. It will matter only if other evidence links it to access or preparation. Phone records move on a parallel track. With the proper legal process, the team requests a limited geofence around the block during the relevant hour. The aim is simple: identify devices that entered a tight radius, remained long enough to align with the masked figure's appearance, and left before the welfare check. This is not a dragnet for curiosity's sake, it is a focused attempt to see whether a familiar device shows up in a place it needs to be explained. If a device is hidden or powered down, the absence can still be informative when paired with other records, vehicle movement, card transactions, or logins from another location. Inside the house, the internal timeline is built from little things. A smart thermostat logs a door opening at 8:39, a kitchen motion sensor trips at 8:41, and nothing else records movement after 8:46. Those systems aren't perfect clocks, but together they draw a shape. Someone crossed the threshold, someone moved within a short radius, and the house went still. When you lay that over the outdoor footage, the windows line up. The figure on the side of the house is present at the right minute to be inside when the sensors record those blips. Detectives map routines from previous Fridays. Neighbors confirm seeing Elena return after drop-off most weeks. A delivery service shows no packages scheduled for that morning. Maintenance crews are not booked. There is no innocent reason for a masked, hooded, gloved person to approach a side entrance in that window. The image quality is strong enough to confirm posture and clothing type, not strong enough to give a face. That is common. It shifts the next questions to possession: who owns similar gear, who purchased chemicals or protective equipment recently, who has a route that explains the partial plate. A small, human detail sits under the footage review. You can see the quiet of that street in October, the leaves not yet raked, the pause before the lunch hour traffic starts. It's why investigators keep their language measured. People who knew Elena are watching. They deserve clarity without noise. The clarity today is limited but valuable: a masked entrant during the exact window, a consistent route to and from the home, interior devices that register movement within minutes, and no sign of forced entry. Everything points to a controlled approach and a controlled exit. By the end of this phase, a board on the squad room wall shows 3 aligned columns: exterior video times, interior device logs, and school schedule blocks. The overlap is tight. It reduces the pool of realistic suspects to people who knew the routine, had a way to enter without damage, and were prepared to work with a chemical that acts quickly. It doesn't name a person yet. It tells the team where to push next, purchases, protective gear, and any prior practice masked by everyday life. You start with proximity and work outward. Detectives make a clean list of everyone who had reason to be near the house on Friday, October 17, 2025, and everyone who knew the schedule well enough to exploit the gap after the school run. Family members, close contacts, recent service providers, anyone with a spare key or code, each name is logged, and each interview is recorded with the same opening questions. Where were you between 8 and 10? Who can confirm it? What device or receipt can show you there? Neighbors go first because they anchor what's normal on Larch Drive. They describe Elena Osif's routine in simple terms: school drop-off, return home, quick errands some days, most Fridays quiet. They do not report shouting, banging, or a forced entry on the morning she died. Detectives compare those statements to the synchronized doorbell footage and the interior device logs assembled in the previous phase. The times line up. A figure approaches the side of the house just after drop-off. The interior sensors register brief movement. The house is still again before 11. Interviews reinforced that this was not a chaotic event. It was deliberate and fast. From there, the circle tightens to people with historical access. Detectives verify whoever had a key, who knew door codes, and whether any lock changes were made in recent months. A locksmith is contacted to confirm service records. If a code was changed, who knew the new one? If not, who might still remember an older code or know a way around it? It's not speculation, it's a checklist that reduces assumptions. The undisturbed entry points in the house keep this lane active. The second investigative board, preparation, moves in parallel. The method points to planning, a fast-acting chemical, close range, controlled time on site. That leads to simple procurement questions. Subpoenas go to local and online retailers for recent purchases of protective masks, chemical-resistant gloves, small containers, and any compound that could impair breathing. Detectives are careful with this. Many households buy cleaners and PPE for ordinary reasons. What matters are timestamps, quantities, and whether any purchase coincides with known timeline markers, the divorce papers served on October 9th, or the week leading into October 17th. Receipts and delivery confirmations are matched against devices and vehicles. That's how an ordinary receipt becomes relevant. Alibis are checked in the least dramatic way possible: cards, cameras, clocks. A person says they were at work, their building logs and security video should show it. Another claims to have been on the road. Toll records and pump charges will either support or undercut that claim. If a phone is part of the story, its activity is compared to the geofence slice around Larch Drive during the critical minutes. Investigators do not announce names at this stage, and they don't chase hunches past what the records can bear. A quiet case like this demands restraint. The goal is to take people off the board for solid reasons and leave only those whose timelines don't hold. Statements about prior incidents are documented carefully. Patrol logs already show multiple responses to domestic disputes in the months before October. One report includes a threat invoking household chemicals. Detectives ask follow-up questions but avoid editorializing. They want dates, witnesses, screenshots, and any messages that show pattern or intent. If safety plans were discussed with friends or family, those conversations are captured in summary form. It's not to dramatize, it's to establish whether risk was recognized and whether escalation followed legal milestones like service of divorce papers. A partial license plate from a feeder road camera becomes a working lead, not a conclusion. Analysts run likely combinations against DMV records and restrict the results by time, vehicle color, and model captured on supplemental footage. A short list forms, and the interview team schedules quiet, routine conversations. Most names drop off quickly with documentation: an ATM withdrawal across town, a supervisor's time punch, an appointment that sits inside a waiting room log. The point is not to rule in a suspect, but to let the records rule out as many people as possible. Slow work builds strong cases. Inside the squad room, the 3 columns, exterior video, interior sensors, schedule, now have a fourth, access/preparation results. It collects specific confirmations: who actually possessed keys in October, who asked about pickup times, who changed routines after October 9th, who ordered or handled protective gear. None of these items alone proves a homicide. Together, they create friction against an alibi that doesn't fit. When a person of interest says, "I never go near that street," and a camera shows a matching vehicle looping the block twice within minutes of the doorbell clip, the friction becomes a question that has to be answered with documents, not explanations. There's a human lane that never closes. Victim advocates coordinate with the family. School personnel are updated on a need-to-know basis so younger children are protected from rumor and speculation. The case team keeps public statements tight. They confirm the date, the location, and the fact of a homicide. They do not float theories. The family deserves a conclusion that won't be reversed by a misstep in week 1. By the end of this stage, the pool is smaller. People whose alibis survived comparison to cameras, sensors, and purchases have been documented and removed. What remains are those whose proximity to the house, knowledge of the routine, or procurement history can't be reconciled with the minutes that matter. The evidence still doesn't name a person on its own, but it points squarely at access and preparation as the keys. That is where the next set of warrants will land, along with a more detailed readout from the lab. Probable cause isn't a hunch, it's a stack that holds when you push on it. By the end of the first week, the stack in Herrick's looks like this: a synchronized exterior approach by a masked figure during the known school run gap, interior devices that log movement in the same minutes, no forced entry, and a short, controlled stay that matches a method designed to act fast. What turns alignment into action is what comes next: links that leave the realm of could be and move into can be shown. Detectives return to the access audit. Key possession in October is confirmed on paper, not memory. Door codes are verified through service records. Anyone who ever had a key or code is asked to account for it, who turned it in, when, and where. A locksmith provides dates. One prior change is on file. The newer code is documented as shared only inside a narrow circle. The absence of prior marks at the entries matters here. It points back to familiarity more than force. Procurement subpoenas begin to land. They're limited to what the method suggests: protective masks, chemical-resistant gloves, small containers, and compounds consistent with respiratory collapse. Many results are mundane: household cleaners, single boxes of gloves. A few are not. One purchase set aligns with the week after divorce papers were served on October 9th, 2025. Another appears days before October 17th. Receipts alone don't solve cases, but receipts at the right time, paired with the right clothing or residue, begin to speak the same language as the footage. Alibis are tested against independent clocks. A claimed work shift is compared to building access logs and a parking timestamp. A reported errand goes up against a store's internal camera. A phone that never left the office shows a gap in routine app pings that coincides with the window on Larch Drive. The team doesn't argue with explanations, they compare them to records. When the records disagree, the next step is simple: preserve the contradiction and look for the physical tie that resolves it. That tie arrives in small pieces. A pair of gloves recovered under warrant is bagged and sent for trace comparison. A mask with a faint odor is logged the same way. Investigators don't announce the findings yet. Lab work is still running, but they have enough to assemble the narrative a judge needs to see: opportunity defined by routine knowledge, access without damage, preparation evidenced by purchases, and movement in and out of the residence at the exact minute the house's devices show activity. Each line stands on its own. Together, they cross the line into probable cause. On Thursday, October 24th, 2025, detectives brief the prosecutor and execute the arrest plan. The person of interest is taken into custody without incident. At arraignment, the charge is entered: murder in the second degree. The court orders remand without bail. Prosecutors state on the record that the case will be presented to a grand jury for potential first-degree consideration. The public summary is tight and by the book: a homicide charged, an investigation active, and no further detail that could compromise trial integrity. That's intentional. Families deserve a case that survives cross-examination more than they need a headline in week 1. There's a human moment that doesn't make the docket. Community members leave flowers near the block, and neighbors ask what they can do for the children. The answer is simple: respect the process, share verified information with investigators, and avoid speculation that muddies the path to court. In towns like this, trust is part of public safety. Good investigations protected by staying factual and letting the evidence, not the volume, carry the story. By day's end, the board in the squad room changes labels. Persons of interest becomes accused. The underlying evidence doesn't vanish because a charge is filed. It becomes the backbone for everything that follows: discovery, lab confirmations, motions, and, ultimately, a jury's understanding. The house on Larch Drive remains the only crime scene. The dates remain fixed: October 9th for service of papers, October 17th for the homicide, October 24th for arrest and arraignment, October 25th for the current posture, charged, remanded, prosecution ongoing. Lab work is slow until it isn't. After the arrest on October 24th, the medical examiner and the crime lab file the first formal documents that matter in court: cause and manner. Homicide is affirmed, and the mechanism stays careful: asphyxiation due to an unknown chemical agent. That phrasing never changed, and it doesn't need to. What changes now is how narrow the science makes the field. A full toxicology panel rules out common intoxicants and natural disease processes that could explain a sudden collapse. No cardiac surprise. No overdose. The findings are consistent with a fast interruption of the body's ability to use oxygen. That conclusion fits what the scene already suggested: a short window, a quiet room, and a technique that doesn't take long. The lab does not name a brand or a specific compound. It doesn't have to. The report states what the chemistry shows and what it does not. Trace comes in from 3 places: the victim's clothing, the half-bath trap removed under warrant, and items seized during the access/preparation warrants executed before arraignment. Each line is handled by chain of custody and logged against time. The house samples are small, as expected in a controlled event. There is residue with corrosive characteristics on a face-adjacent portion of clothing, and a compatible signature inside the sink component. The amounts are low. The match is based on profile, not a visible stain. In this kind of case, low is still meaningful. You do not need a spill to prove exposure. On the seized item side, technicians document protective gear consistent with what appears on the doorbell footage: a mask and gloves. They're treated as potential carriers, not conclusions. Swabs from those items are compared to the profile recovered from the sink trap and clothing. Labs speak in ranges and likelihoods. Reports avoid the word identical unless the chemistry leaves no room. Here, what matters is direction. The house and the gear point the same way. For a jury one day, that puts the method in a person's hands instead of in theory. The medical examiner's final written summary is deliberately plain. It confirms homicide, defines the mechanism, and notes the facial chemical injury as consistent with close exposure. No alternative manner of death is supported by the exam. Combined with the synchronized video and interior device logs already established, the science now does what good science does in court: it reduces explanations rather than invents them. Cross-examination can challenge process. It cannot turn a hypoxic mechanism into natural causes. Detectives fold the lab documents into discovery. Prosecutors update the case file for the grand jury presentation they've already announced. That presentation won't rely on one exhibit. It will move in a straight line: routine and access, timed entry and exit, no forced damage, the ME's findings, the residue comparisons, and procurement records that bracket the dates. October 9th for service of divorce papers and October 17th for the homicide at the Herrick's home. The point isn't drama. It's coherence. In cases like this, coherence is what persuades. There's a necessary human note as these results arrive. Scientific language can feel cold to families who want a name for what was used. The reality is that unknown chemical protects the case more than it frustrates it. The standard in American courts is reliability, not spectacle. What the lab gave is reliable, a cause, a manner, and a set of traces that line up with the timeline and the method. That's how you keep a file strong from arraignment to verdict. By the morning after arraignment, the case is exactly where the record says it should be. On October 24, 2025, a judge in Nassau County reads the charge, murder in the second degree, and orders remand without bail. Prosecutors state they will present the file to a grand jury for possible first-degree consideration. As of October 25, 2025, that is the official posture: accused, charged, in custody, prosecution active. Nothing more, nothing less. From here, the work becomes procedural and quiet. Discovery moves to counsel. Motions will test how evidence is handled, not retry the scene in public. The established record, timed approach and exit, interior device minutes, medical examiner's cause and manner, and lab correlations, now sits in a legal pipeline that protects the integrity of the process and the rights of everyone involved. One timeline, one scene, the Herrick's home. The story remains coherent because the facts do. Communities often ask what to do when a case turns their street into a headline. In practice, support the family, report what you know directly to investigators, and resist rumor. 3 children lost their center in a single morning. Schools and advocates will do what they can, but steadiness from neighbors matters more than any speech. In American courts, restraint is not a weakness, it's how you get to the truth without losing it on the way. There's one lesson this file underlines without preaching. The weeks around separation and legal service can be dangerous in intimate partner cases. Recognizing that pattern early, documenting threats, setting safety plans, and using local resources saves lives. It is not a comment on this defendant's guilt, it is a fact borne out across many jurisdictions and one this investigation treated seriously from day one. We end where we must, with what is certain and current. Alina Asif, 46, was killed inside her home in Herrick's, New York. Asif Qureshi stands charged with murder in the second degree, remanded without bail, pending grand jury review. The rest will be decided under oath, not online. If you live in a quiet town, remember, calm streets don't solve crimes, careful people do. I've walked you through one home, one timeline, and one hard truth. In moments like these, safety is a plan, not a promise. If you're separating, document threats, tell someone you trust, and use local resources early. Justice moves on evidence, communities heal with steadiness and care. What do you think matters most now, supporting the kids, sharing verified tips, or teaching the warning signs? If this story reached you, tell me where you're watching from, or why it didn't work for you. And if you want more real cases told clearly, please subscribe to the channel.